Welcome back. I'm so glad you made it. Come on in. Get close. It's a long night, so turn down the lights. Get your blankets, your doors. Make your space warm, safe. We're going to be here a while. I have the whole backlog here. 2 hours of echoes. It's the things that happened when the world was too still. I haven't really been able to look at them alone, not for a long time. But you're here now, and it's time to get them put away. So let them rest. There are 11 cases in this file, 11 moments that broke. We're going to get through every one of them, together. Don't worry, I'm right here. Just close your eyes. Let's just drift. Halfway between 0 the apartment that drips color. The building was ordinary from the street, gray and silent, but the moment I stepped inside, the walls seemed to pulse like a living canvas. A faint hum followed me up the stairs, like a distant organ tuning itself in a forgotten cathedral. The door to my apartment was closed, but behind it, I could hear soft sloshing, as if liquid moved beneath the floorboards. I opened it, and the air smelled sweet and metallic, thick with something I could not name. The walls bled color, vibrant reds, electric blues, and sickly greens, dripping down in slow, viscous rivers. I reached to touch one of the streams, and it felt warm, almost alive, sliding over my fingers like liquid skin. It left traces on me, faint impressions of shapes that were not mine. Memories that whispered in languages I almost recognized. The floor rippled beneath my weight, and the colors formed small faces, each blinking once before disappearing into the next cascade. A lamp flickered, casting shadows that did not match their objects, twisting around corners and curling along the ceiling like black smoke. I heard a knock from inside the apartment itself, soft but deliberate, though no one else could possibly be here. The hum grew louder, swelling into a chorus of voices that merged with the dripping walls, forming words that pressed against my skull. I stepped back, and the walls reacted, stretching and curling toward me as if inhaling. Each color seemed to pulse with intention, green spirals forming eyes that followed my every movement. The paint on the ceiling pooled downward, forming grotesque hands that reached for the light, leaving streaks of color behind. I ran to the window, but the glass rippled like liquid, reflecting scenes I had never lived through. My reflection stared back, but the colors in my hair and eyes were wrong, shifting between red, purple, and black in impossible gradients. The whispers became voices, recounting moments of my life I could not remember, twisting them into stories that made no sense. The door slammed shut on its own, and the hum became a scream, reverberating through every corner of the apartment. Shadows pooled at the base of the walls, twisting upward into shapes that were almost human, almost animal, but never fully one or the other. I stumbled toward the bathroom, only to see the tiles ripple like water, its faces forming and vanishing as the colors leaked into each other. A faucet turned on, but instead of water, thick crimson liquid poured, forming small pools that reflected impossible skies. The mirror refused to show me my reflection, instead displaying a figure standing behind me, moving only when I blinked. I tried to run, but the hallway elongated, stretching impossibly, colors dripping along the edges like the building itself was bleeding. Each step forward left traces on the floor, fingerprints that glowed faintly, shifting and twisting into grotesque shapes. I tripped over a puddle, and the liquid pulled at my hands, leaving faint impressions that would never wash away. The hum coalesced into a singular voice, soft and coaxing, promising understanding if I would only step closer to the largest pool of color in the living room. I resisted, but my body moved on its own, drawn toward the swirling vortex of reds, greens, and blues, my fingers nearly touching the living paint. Suddenly, the colors shot upward, forming a vortex that enveloped the ceiling, walls, and floor, blurring the edges of reality into something impossible. Faces emerged in the swirl, screaming silently, some with my own features twisted grotesquely, staring at me from the moving tapestry. I felt a pull in my chest, like my own memories were being unstitched, drawn into the painting along with the voices and faces. I closed my eyes, willing myself to wake, and when I opened them, the apartment was still, the colors settling into faint streaks, as if exhausted. A single drop of color fell from the ceiling, landing on my hand and leaving a faint warmth. A reminder that the apartment had not forgotten me. I left quickly, but as I closed the door behind me, I felt it watching, the colors inside pulsing faintly, waiting for my return. The statues that blink. The park was empty when I arrived, but the statues were already watching. Their eyes reflected the moonlight with a shimmer that felt alive, like oil moving over water. One of them moved slightly as I blinked, a hand curling around a stone railing that had been untouched moments ago, bending in a way stone should never bend. The air smelled of damp earth and something metallic, faintly sweet. I stepped closer to a marble figure of a child, its face innocent yet impossibly detailed, and its head tilted toward me, the eyes following without moving the body. Every path through the park seemed to bend around the statues, the trees leaning in as if listening, and the shadows twisting to fill spaces they should not occupy. A faint whisper drifted across the grass, carried by the wind. I reached out toward a statue of an old man, and the fingers flexed slightly, forming depressions and patterns too deliberate to be natural. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, but its echo came from the statues themselves. From a corner, a statue I had not noticed before stepped forward, a figure of a young woman, her eyes blinking once, no, twice, then staring as if they remembered me, reflecting dozens of faces that were not mine, but somehow familiar. I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned, only statues remained, frozen yet somehow aware, each one angled slightly toward me. One figure, a man holding a lantern, tilted the flame toward my feet. The whispers became voices, low and coaxing, recounting moments of my life that had never happened, blending truth and nightmare seamlessly. I stumbled toward the exit, but the gates were gone, replaced by walls that stretched upward. A bench lifted itself slightly, hovering a few inches above the ground before settling. I ran past a fountain, and the water rose to form faces, screaming silently, ripples distorting the park into something unreal and grotesque. The wind carried laughter, not human, not animal, but something between, echoing from the stones themselves, and I realized the park had remembered me. I tripped over a tree root, or maybe it was a statue's arm reaching through the earth. The lantern figure floated closer, and the flame split into dozens of miniature eyes, each watching my every movement, blinking in impossible synchrony. I pressed my hands to my ears as the voices rose, overlapping, layering into a choir of whispers and screams that resonated from every corner. The ground itself seemed alive, sinking and swelling under my feet, guiding me to the fountain's edge, where water now poured upward like gravity had reversed. Faces formed in the fountain, grotesque imitations of townsfolk I had seen. I stumbled backward, and a statue of a child reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve, leaving a faint warmth, almost a pulse, that I could not explain. The whispers condensed into a single phrase, low and deliberate, repeating over and over, "We have been waiting." The lantern figure floated directly before me, flame eyes burning, and I realized every statue, When I finally collapsed onto the ground, the statues gathered around. The park fell silent, but even now, I know they are watching. The Church of Twisted Candles. The bell tower had been blackened for decades, its iron frame warped, yet the wind carried the faintest hollow toll as if it remembered prayers long forgotten. I first noticed the church on a fog-heavy evening, its silhouette jutting from the hillside like a broken tooth against the pale moon. The door was ajar, though I knew it had been sealed the day before. The hinges groaned as if complaining about my intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with wax and decay. Its candles burned with unnatural colors, green flames licking the shadows, red dripping down the walls like frozen blood. Faces formed in the melting wax. I thought it was the flicker of candlelight, but they were too deliberate, too human, too aware. I stepped closer, and one face seemed to breathe. Ta's widened, staring directly at me, yet no mouth moved to speak. A whisper came from nowhere. My name, drawn out, slow and careful, curling around my ears like smoke from a funeral pyre. Shadows in the nave began shifting independently, stretching and curling against the stone, forming shapes that had no business existing. Every candle I passed seemed to watch me, flames bending toward me, as if leaning to overhear my thoughts. A single candle fell over behind me. I turned, expecting wax on stone, but it hovered, tilting upright, moving as though on invisible fingers. I tried to leave, but the door slammed shut, metal striking stone with a finality that echoed like a gunshot through the empty hall. The whispers multiplied, overlapping, weaving stories I did not recognize. Histories that weren't mine, yet I felt them coil inside my mind. I reached the altar. The crucifix was intact, yet the figure was elongated, limbs bent in impossible angles, eyes hollow but aware. Wax pooled at my feet, forming shapes that resembled small animals, cats, birds, rats, yet they twisted unnaturally. Nothing breathed. One shadow detached itself from the wall, moved ahead of me, stretching toward a pew, curling over as if inspecting some hidden object I could not see. The air grew warmer, the candle flames dancing violently, casting the ceiling into a kaleidoscope of reds, greens, and sickly yellows. I heard a choir singing not from speakers, not from any choir loft, but rising from the wax itself, voices pressed together in agony and ecstasy. Each note burned my ears, yet demanded that I follow, drawing me closer to the twisted candles along the side aisles. I reached out to touch one, and it detached itself from its holder, floating upward, its flame forming a miniature face that screamed silently. Behind it, the other candles swayed in rhythm, forming a grotesque congregation of light, each face writhing, a shadow pulsating with something alive. The smell of burnt hair and incense mingled, thick and choking, pulling memories of childhood churches that had never existed into my mind. Stumbled toward the exit, but the shadows had formed a corridor, impossible angles bending the space, each step forward folding the floor beneath me. I tripped, hands scraping against pews that were not solid, fingers sinking through, grasping only air and faint warmth, as if the furniture had a pulse. The whispers crescendoed into a scream, and the faces in the wax turned toward me, mouths opening impossibly wide, eyes rolling into the backs of their heads. One candle floated down in front of me, flames licking my chest without burning. Its wax dripped onto my hands, leaving a trace of memories that were not mine. The crucifix leaned forward slightly, and I felt its hollow eyes pierce through me, measuring something intangible, weighing my fear against the air of the church. I closed my eyes, trying to summon rationality, and when I opened them, the candles had aligned into a path toward the altar. each flame bowing toward me as if expecting a gesture I did not know. The final candle hovered over the altar, its flames splitting into dozens of smaller faces, each screaming, each whispering, each looking for something they could not find. I turned to run, but the door was no longer where it had been. The stone walls bent impossibly, corridors repeating, mirrors forming on the surfaces, showing me endlessly trapped. I heard the bell toll once more, hollow and dry. The shadows lunged, the wax faces reaching, the choir's wail shaking the very air from my lungs. A hand, not my own, touched my shoulder. I spun, and there was nothing, yet I felt the weight of every candle, every shadow, every whisper pressing against me. When I finally stumbled outside, the church was silent, black against the moon. But a single candle burned at the doorway, twisted flame alive, as if waiting for my next visit. The lake that colors the moon. The lake looked ordinary at first, still and quiet, but when I stepped closer, the reflection of the moon was wrong. Deep reds bleeding into purples, the surface rippling in impossible patterns. Mist clung to the shoreline, thick and heavy, carrying a faint metallic temps, as if the water itself exhaled something alive. I knelt at the edge, and my fingers broke the surface. The water was warm, unnervingly so, and it left a faint pulse on my skin. My reflection stared back, but the face was subtly different, eyes larger, lips thinner, shadows carved into the cheeks that should not exist. I blinked, and the reflection moved slightly out of sync, grinning when I did not, frowning when I smiled. A ripple expanded from the center, forming concentric rings that stretched and bent the forested shoreline into impossible angles. I tried to pull my hand back, but the water clung, coating my fingers in a viscous film that shimmered with shifting colors. The moon itself seemed to warp, elongating and twisting, turning from silver to a palette of deep crimson, green, and black, bleeding into the night. I stumbled back, but the reflection did not. It reached forward, fingers stretching impossibly, brushing the water in a way that seemed to distort reality itself. Whispers rose from the lake, not words I understood, but syllables that pressed against my memory, tugging at names I had never heard but felt familiar. The shoreline shifted, sand rising and falling as if breathing, forming shapes, chairs, doors, and windows that had no reason to exist there. The water began to boil slightly, bubbles forming faces, each screaming silently, features contorting as if animated by unseen hands. I took a step back, and the mist thickened, curling around my legs like slow serpents, tugging me closer to the lake's edge. A tree leaned over the water unnaturally, branches bending in impossible arcs, casting shadows that moved independently of the moon. The reflection smiled wider, and I realized it was not just my face it mirrored, but an amalgam of every person who had ever looked into the lake. Colors pulsed along the surface, spreading outward in fractal patterns, each ripple forming grotesque shapes that twisted into faces, animals, and forms I could not name. I leaned closer, hypnotized, and saw a figure in the water rising. It's translucent yet horrifyingly real, fingers dripping with the same viscous, pulsing colors. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of iron and smoke, though no fire burned. And the mist now formed shapes that crawled along the surface like living shadows. I stumbled backward, but the ground beneath me felt fluid, shifting like wet clay, guiding me toward the center of the lake. A sudden gust of wind revealed faint laughter. I pitched, echoing from somewhere beneath the water, as if the lake itself had a voice. Ripples formed letters on the surface, twisting and curling before my eyes, spelling names I had never known, yet that felt intimately familiar. Us. I reached toward a face forming in the water, and it recoiled, pulling at me with unseen strength, as though the lake was alive and aware of my presence. The moonlight reflected on the water like molten metal, and the lake began to undulate violently, waves forming impossible arcs, folding space into itself. Shadows on the shore stretched unnaturally, bending over me, merging with the mist, whispering promises I could not refuse. I fell to my knees, fingers brushing the edge, and the water responded, forming a vortex of color that pulled at my vision, memories, and body. Each face in the water screamed silently, echoing through my skull, eyes opening impossibly wide, staring directly into mine. I tried to step back, but the shoreline had changed. Hills and trees that had never existed now pressed close, enclosing the lake like a cage. The mist condensed, forming a figure, pale and impossible, rising from the water, limbs stretching in ways that should not exist. I felt my reflection twist and split, two versions of myself staring back, both reaching forward, mouths moving silently as if calling me to join them. I stumbled, and the ground beneath me rippled like water, forming a small pool that reflected another world entirely. Brighter, yet grotesque in impossible ways. A final ripple expanded across the lake, carrying colors that sank into my vision, my skin, my thoughts, until I realized I could no longer distinguish reality from the reflection. I ran, or perhaps I fell, the mist curling around me, the lake pulsing behind me. But even as I escaped its edge, I knew the colors were still watching, waiting for the next glance. Before we start, a warning. Some things in your home are not what they seem. Sometimes, the ordinary watches quietly. Sometimes, it learns. If you like stories that creep under your skin, hit subscribe. You'll want to be here for this one. This story is called The Voice in My Ceiling Fan. I first noticed it late one night, lying in bed, the ceiling fan humming above me. At first, I thought it was just the blades cutting through the dry air. Tick. Then I heard it whisper my name, soft, careful, almost polite. I froze, listening. The whisper repeated once more, almost exactly like my voice would sound if I were calling myself across the room. My heart sank. I told myself it was the wind. Old fans creak, old houses talk. The dentist started mimicking the rhythm of my breathing. Slow, steady, in, out. Every time I inhaled, I heard it inhale. Every exhale was mirrored perfectly. I rolled onto my side, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. But the hum changed when I moved. It dipped lower, closer. I grabbed my phone to record, but the microphone picked up nothing. The fan kept whispering. I could hear it through my ears, through my skull. I tried to sleep with the light on. It didn't help. Its fan rotated lazily above me, whispering, learning, patient. Days passed. Every time I returned home, it knew I was there before I touched the switch. It moved faster when I entered the room, slower when I lingered, holding my breath, pausing my movements. Sometimes it copied my gestures, tilting, twisting, reaching from above. Once, I whispered back, "What do you want?" The T didn't answer immediately. Then the blade slowed. A cold draft brushed my face, and a voice, wet and hollow, replied inside my head, not my ears. Watching, learning, waiting. I shivered and pulled the blankets over my head. I didn't sleep well. Every fan in the house began sounding slightly wrong. Each rotation felt like fingers brushing against the ceiling. One night, I woke to find the fan still, but the blades rotated in shadow on the walls. It wasn't spinning, it was copying motion from somewhere else. I left the room, and the shadow stayed. As I returned hours later, lights off, and it moved again. Following me, I tried disconnecting it. Unplugged, screws removed, it didn't matter. The hum returned, from somewhere I couldn't locate. Sometimes it whispered words I didn't understand. Sometimes it repeated what I had said days earlier. Exactly. The wrong order. The wrong tone. As if studying me. I stopped using fans altogether. Windows, vents, anything with air movement. It adapted. The pattern remained. One night, I dreamt it fell from the ceiling, spinning blades, but silent, hovering inches from my face. I woke screaming. The fan above me whispered my own scream. I moved out temporarily, came back weeks later. Everything seemed normal until I turned the light off. The fan hummed differently. It didn't mimic me anymore. It had learned to anticipate me. Now, I avoid my bedroom at night. The hum follows me through the house, patient, observing. I catch glimpses of shadows moving on the walls when no light is on, slow rotations that shouldn't exist. Sometimes, I hear my own voice whispering back to me from above. I never speak aloud anymore. I never move without thinking. The last time I went to bed, I could swear the blades slowed before I even entered. And when I lay down, I felt something spin beneath me. Not the fan. Something else. Learning. I keep telling myself, it's just air. Old wiring. Imagination. But every night, the hum follows me. And I know it's waiting for the moment I stop noticing. Before we start, a warning. Sometimes your home isn't just empty space. Sometimes it breathes, watches, waits. If you like discovering what lurks in familiar places, make sure you're subscribed. This one will crawl under your skin. Story is called The Fingers in My Washing Machine. I first noticed it when I was doing laundry late at night, and the drum of the machine sounded like it was, moving against its own rhythm, not the spin cycle. The clothes inside shifted as if something was crawling through them, pushing against fabric in slow, deliberate patterns. I froze, hand hovering over the start button, listening. The tapping and scraping were soft but distinct, like fingers dragging along metal from inside. At first, I told myself it was just a stuck sock or a loose button caught in the drum. But the sound continued even after I emptied the machine. It only stopped when I left the laundry room, and resumed the second I returned. The next night, I tested it. I left the door open, nothing inside. The tapping began almost immediately. Short, precise, measured. I touched the rim. Cold. Nothing moved under my fingers. A tand. But the sound tapped faster, as if annoyed I'd dared to intervene. A tase. I tried recording it with my phone. The audio was silent. Scraping. No tapping. When I listened in the room itself, the sound was deafening. I stopped doing laundry at night. The machine waited, at first silent. Then subtle scratches appeared along the inner drum, thin and shallow, like someone had practiced tracing letters. I moved the machine a few inches to check underneath. Nothing. Not a single mark beyond what I had seen inside. Then the tapping began outside the machine, inside the room, inside the walls. A wet, subtle scraping that followed me wherever I walked. One night I muttered, "Who's there?" The sound paused, then tapped a rhythm back, almost like a response, almost like it understood. I tried to ignore it, but the rhythm changed when I entered the room, faster when I lingered, slower when I turned away. I began noticing small red marks on my fingers after using the machine. Thin scratches, almost like measurements. Too deliberate to be coincidence. The tapping became more coordinated. I could almost hear a pattern forming. Not random, not chaotic, intentional. It learned my schedule. It waited for laundry nights. It pushed harder when I stayed late folding clothes, scraping and tapping in patterns that made my skin crawl. One morning, I opened the drum and noticed a single fingertip-shaped indentation in a shirt, pressed into the fabric as if someone had pushed from the inside. I tried leaving offerings, coins, small objects. Nothing changed. The sound persisted, adapting, growing patient. I started covering the drum with a towel. It muffled the noise but didn't stop it. Sometimes the tapping moved outside the machine, testing me. One night, I woke to the machine spinning. No power, no lights, just the sound of tapping inside, faster than normal, urgent, insistent. I never approached. I lay in bed, listening, slowed to a steady rhythm, like breathing. No, I do laundry only during the day. Even when I'm careful, I sometimes catch glimpses of shadows in the room corners, twisting, curling toward the drum. I've learned not to look inside, not to touch. Not to listen too closely. Always measuring, practicing, learning. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I swear I hear it tap my name. This is halfway between zero. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, take a second to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future uploads. Alright, on to our first story. It's titled, The House That Memorized Me. I moved into the house because it was cheap and because the landlord warned me it took time to get used to how it sounded at night. The first evening, I noticed the floors creaked a second after I stepped. It's like the house was replaying my movement instead of responding to it. So when I walked the hallway, the sound followed behind me, delayed, copying the rhythm of my steps with uncomfortable accuracy. I tested it by stopping suddenly, and the creak still came, finishing the step I never took. The mirrors inside were old and wavy, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that they showed me walking through rooms I wasn't in. This bathroom mirror, I saw myself pass behind the shower curtain while I was still standing at the sink. I laughed it off until the house started doing it with sound too, replaying my coughs, my breathing, hours after I made them. Late at night, I'd hear myself pacing upstairs, even though I was sitting perfectly still on the couch below. I recorded audio on my phone, and every playback included footsteps I never heard while recording. The sounds weren't random, they followed my habits, my routines, like the house was practicing being me. One night, I heard my voice call my name from the spare bedroom, using the exact tone I use when I'm alone. Kay opened the door, and the room was empty, but warm, like someone had just stood there thinking. Kay. After that, doors began opening on their own, but only after I walked past them earlier in the day. KK. The house wasn't reacting, it was remembering. I stopped leaving for work, afraid of what it might do with the time alone, but that didn't help. Even while I slept, the house moved, replaying my midnight trips to the kitchen with perfect timing. I woke up one morning to find muddy footprints in the hallway, shaped exactly like mine, walking in reverse. The mirrors changed next, no longer showing reflections but reenactments, scenes from earlier days, looping silently. I watched myself brush my teeth from 3 nights ago, then watched that version of me look directly at me. His mouth moved out of sync, whispering something I couldn't hear. Smashed the mirror, but the reflection kept going in the shards, continuing the scene without glass. The house began skipping steps, forming actions I hadn't done yet, doors opening before I reached them, lights turning on ahead of me. It was learning faster now. It's one evening. I heard the front door unlock, followed by my footsteps coming inside while I stood frozen in the kitchen. A version of me walked past the doorway, breathing hard, like it had rushed to get home first. I followed the sound into the living room and saw the couch already dented, warm where someone had just sat. The house creaked approvingly, settling, like a thing satisfied with its copy. That night, I heard my own voice upstairs saying it finally fit better this way. In the mirror, I saw myself unpacking boxes I hadn't opened yet, moving in permanently. The house stopped replaying me after that. Now it only plays the other one. And every time I try to leave, the door hesitates like it's waiting to see which of us belongs here more. Some closets aren't empty. Some corners hold things that wait silently, learning your habits. If you like discovering the strange hiding in plain sight, subscribe. You'll want to see this one. This story is called The Shadows in My Closet, and the corners seemed heavier, darker, like something was pressing just beyond the clothes. They didn't scatter when I blinked, didn't shimmer or flicker, simply waited, pooling in the corners, patient and quiet. So when I stepped closer, one stretched across the floor like a thin ribbon, pausing mid-motion, almost testing my reaction. I slammed the door shut and froze, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. The feeling followed me into the hallway. The next night, I left the closet open. Shadows pooled along the shelves, settling between jackets and hanging shirts, perfectly still until I blinked. It twitched when I looked away, shifting just enough to be noticed in my peripheral vision. Away shined my phone flashlight into the closet. A new one had appeared, thicker, leaning slightly toward me as if curious about my reaction. They moved across reflective surfaces to mirrors, windows, the surface of my coffee table. Always alert, always waiting. I whispered, "What do you want?" The shadows shifted together, and a low, hollow scraping echoed from the closet floor, like breathing, empty and wet. I tried to block the door with boxes and clothes, thrased through anyway, moving under and around obstacles, patient and precise. I began sleeping in the living room. The shadows followed, gathering in corners I thought were safe, leaning, observing. Occasionally, I caught glimmers of eyes, watching me. Red scratches appeared on my arms and hands, fine and deliberate, as though someone was practicing measurements on me while I slept. The shadows learned my schedule, waiting longer on nights I stayed late, shifting and stretching while I watched from afar. I stopped speaking aloud in the house. Sometimes I would see them in the reflections of dark windows, just outlines at first, then forms slowly bending toward me. I began locking doors I hadn't before. The shadows found ways around them, pooling beneath the gaps and creeping along thresholds. Every night, I hear subtle shifts and scrapes in the corners. One morning, I found a new shadow under my bed, perfectly crouched, waiting, patient and calm, at ease and calm, as if they had practiced standing there without being noticed. I moved furniture to block the closet. They adapted, forming near the walls, along ceilings, always present. The closet door is always closed now. The shadows have their domain. I avoid the room. I avoid looking. But I know they are there, patient, learning, waiting for the moment I forget them entirely. And when I do, the face in my bathroom mirror never blinked. Before we start, let me ask you something. Have you ever stared at your reflection long enough for it to feel it's wrong? If stories like that pull you in, make sure you're subscribed, because this one still doesn't feel real to me. This is what happened. The first time I noticed it, I was brushing my teeth at midnight, half asleep, watching my reflection sway slightly as the bathroom fan rattled above me. My eyes looked tired, my skin looked pale, and everything felt normal until I realized my reflection wasn't blinking when I was. I blinked twice in a row, slow and deliberate, watching carefully, and my reflection stayed wide-eyed, staring straight through me like it was looking past my face. A cold wave rolled down my spine as I leaned closer to the mirror, searching for smudges, scratches, anything that could explain what I was seeing. The face in the glass leaned closer too, but its movement lagged behind mine, like a delayed video struggling to catch up. I raised my hand slowly, spreading my fingers, and the reflection copied me a second later, slightly off, slightly wrong. My heartbeat started thudding in my ears as I backed away, telling myself I was exhausted, dehydrated, probably hallucinating from staring too long. The next night, I checked again, pretending I didn't care, pretending I wasn't scared, pretending I hadn't thought about it all day at work. This time, it smiled before I did. Not a big smile, just a thin, careful stretch of lips, like it was testing how my face worked. I stood frozen, toothpaste dripping into the sink, watching something wear my expression like a borrowed mask. When I finally forced myself to smile back, its grin widened too far, pulling at the corners like rubber about to snap. After that, it started doing things on its own, tilting its head, raising its eyebrows, lifting its mouth silently when I wasn't speaking. I stopped using the bathroom mirror and brushed my teeth in the kitchen, staring at the dark window instead. But windows started doing it too. Reflections followed me everywhere. Screens, spoons, car windows, black phone screens at night. Every surface slowly learning my face. One morning, I woke up with red marks along my cheeks, like someone had practiced smiling on me while I slept. That night, my reflection finally blinked. Once, slow, satisfied, like it didn't need to pretend anymore. That's the lane. That's your system. That's what keeps people locked in. The black market summoning. They said the invitation was a joke, just graffiti and whispers. I went anyway, and the basement I found beneath the city was alive with things that shouldn't exist. The stairwell smelled of mold and burned incense, each step echoing like a drum in a cavern too large to be real. The chanting below reached my chest and shook my lungs. At the bottom, the room opened into a wide, low-ceilinged chamber, filled with figures wearing masks carved from bone, moving in a rhythm that seemed both human and wrong. Neon symbols flickered across the walls, painted hastily, pulsing in time with the chanting. They crawled like living veins, shifting shape with every beat of the hidden drums. In the center, a raised altar of cracked stone held a shallow basin filled with a black liquid that seemed to reflect not the ceiling, but other impossible places. The cultists' voices rose and fell, harmonizing in ways that made the hair on my arms vibrate. Each syllable carried the weight of a promise I could not understand. One figure approached the altar, holding a curved knife carved with runes I had never seen before. Its blade shimmered unnaturally, reflecting shapes I could not process with my mind. I ducked behind a column, heart hammering, realizing that the chanting wasn't just sounded, was a pulse, pulling at my thoughts, bending perception, twisting the very space around me. The figures began moving faster, arms swinging, masks glowing, liquid from the altar splashing onto the floor, hissing and evaporating into thin neon-colored smoke that burned the back of my throat. I tried to retreat, but the chamber seemed to expand infinitely, the walls stretching, symbols climbing higher, faces forming in the plaster and staring directly at me with hollow eyes. A sudden shriek tore through the room, silent yet deafening, vibrating my teeth and forcing me to my knees. One figure convulsed violently, mask cracking, revealing something far too wrong beneath. The neon smoke coiled like serpents, climbing up walls, wrapping around the other cultists, who continued their ritual as if unaware of the impossible horrors entwining their bodies. I crawled along the floor, trying to remain unseen. Each step revealed more, small figures, twisted and deformed, slinking along the walls, peering and disappearing like shadows that had teeth. The chanting changed rhythm, slower now, deliberate, and I could swear the figures were aware of me. Their eyes behind the masks, tracking my every twitch and breath. One figure stepped toward the altar, stabbing the black liquid with the knife. It rippled unnaturally, revealing faint glimpses of faces that were not human, watching, screaming silently. The walls seemed to pulse in response, the symbols writhing, dripping down like molten glass. And the shadows of the cult twisted into grotesque, impossible shapes that mimicked the liquid. I tried to back away, but the pulse from the chanting caught me, forcing my knees to the ground, my fingers scraping against the stone floor as if it wanted me kneeling. A mask tilted toward me, perfectly still, then suddenly lunged, moving faster than thought, forcing me to roll sideways. Barely escaping the grasp of hands I could barely see, the black liquid began bubbling violently, and the altar convulsed. From its depths, something emerged, humanoid yet grotesque, stretching impossibly, screaming in a chorus that shattered my perception of sound. It teetered backward, hitting the far wall, the chamber tilting impossibly as the cultists moved around me in perfect, synchronized rhythm, each step and gesture designed to pull me deeper. The neon symbols now formed letters I could read, words promising knowledge and death simultaneously, etching themselves into my mind as if I had memorized them by force. I crawled toward a doorway I had ignored, hearing the wet, scraping sound of claws or fingernails along the walls behind me, growing closer, faster, relentless. The figures finally noticed me, their movements, precise and terrifying, circling the altar, chanting louder, summoning something that filled the chamber with a presence I could feel crawling inside me. I slipped through the doorway, barely noticing the stairs back to the street. Every step upward felt like pushing against an invisible force, the chanting echoing behind me, insistent and eternal. I emerged onto the quiet street, the city night calm as if nothing existed below. Yet I could still feel the rhythm of the summoning pulsing beneath my ribs. Even now, when I walk alone, I hear faint whispers and a low, insistent pulse in the distance. The black market still waits, patient, glowing, hungry, and I know it will never stop. The highway thing people warn you about. Everyone in my town knows the story about the thing that walks along Route 17 after midnight, but nobody believes it until they see it themselves. I didn't believe it either when my car broke down on that road at 1:40 a.m. with no signal, no houses nearby, and miles of forest. The engine died suddenly, lights flickering once before the car settled into silence, while the dark highway stretched empty in both directions beneath a cloudless sky. I tried starting the car again, but the key only clicked weakly, leaving me sitting alone in the quiet with nothing except wind moving through trees. Then I saw someone walking along the shoulder of the road far ahead, moving slowly toward my car under the pale wash of distant moonlight. At first I felt relieved because I thought it was another driver or someone from a nearby house who might help me push the car. But something about the way the figure moved made the relief disappear almost immediately, while I watched through the windshield with growing unease. It walked stiffly, each step too slow and careful. Arms hanging straight down without swinging while its head remained perfectly forward. The person never looked around, never hesitated, just continued moving straight toward my car like it had chosen that path long before I arrived. I remembered suddenly what people always say about Route 17 late at night when the road becomes empty and the forests feel too quiet. They say if your car breaks down and you see someone walking towards you on that road, you should never speak first. You should wait. Because if it speaks before you do, then it isn't human. The figure kept approaching slowly until it reached the edge of my headlights, where the light finally revealed its face clearly, or what should have been a face. The skin looked stretched and pale, like wax melting slightly, with eyes that reflected the headlights too brightly to look natural. I locked my doors automatically and felt my pulse pounding in my throat as the figure continued walking closer. It stopped directly in front of my car. It's close enough that I could see small cracks in its lips when it smiled slowly through the windshield. Then it knocked once on the hood. Just one knock. The sound rang louder than it should have in the quiet night air. The thing leaned forward slightly, placing both hands against the front of the car while staring through the glass directly into my eyes. Its mouth opened. I held my breath. Because if the stories were true, the first words mattered. For several seconds, the thing simply stared at me without blinking while the forest around the highway stayed completely silent. Then it finally spoke, but the voice didn't come from its mouth. The sound came from the passenger seat beside me. "Can you give me a ride?" I turned my head slowly. Something was sitting there, smiling. The choir of the forgotten tunnels, deep beneath the city. The walls hummed with a chorus that shouldn't exist. I followed the sound into the forgotten tunnels, and what I saw will haunt me forever. The first steps were hesitant, echoing against broken tiles, water pooling in jagged cracks. The chant grew louder, vibrating through the concrete, twisting the shadows into shapes I couldn't look at directly. Figures appeared from the darkness, cloaked in tattered robes, masks painted in deep crimson, glowing faintly with streaks of phosphorescent green that pulsed with every note of the song. The sound pressed against my chest, a rhythm so precise it forced my heart into sync with the impossible music emanating from every corner of the tunnel. I crouched behind a fallen beam, trying to make sense of the altar ahead. Bones, twisted metal, and glass tubes glowing neon, arranged like a heart someone had broken and rebuilt. One figure leaned over the altar, chanting in a language that clawed at my mind. I could feel the words crawling into my memory, shaping thoughts I didn't own. The shadows on the walls began to shift independently, forming faces that blinked, mouthed words silently, and stared at me with expressions of impossible malice and ecstasy combined. A faint metallic smell filled the tunnel, thick and coppery. And I realized it was not only the neon tubes burning, it was something organic, bleeding into the air with deliberate intent. I tried to back away, but the floor beneath my feet seemed to pulse, each step sinking into something alive, and I understood that escape was no longer optional. One figure turned fully toward me, mask glowing green. I saw teeth protruding through the porcelain eyes, grinning silently. As if aware I was trespassing where no human should survive. The chanting intensified, now a wave that lifted and pushed me, pressing against my chest, forcing my vision to swim with flashes of light I could barely process. I stumbled into a pool of water, the reflection rippling, showing not my face but dozens of pale, screaming masks, staring back, mouths opening and closing without sound. The kneeling cultist drew a blade long and thin, slicing the air above the altar, sending sparks into the neon symbols that writhed along the walls like living veins. The shadows detached from the walls, coiling around the masked figures, tightening and twisting, yet the cult moved in perfect harmony, unaffected, as if the shadows were partners in the ritual. I felt a tug at my shoulder, invisible hands gripping me, pulling me toward the altar. My feet refused to move against it, though my mind screamed to run. The neon symbols began crawling up the ceiling, forming geometric patterns that warped perception, bending the tunnel like liquid concrete. Leaving me dizzy, nauseous, and terrified, one figure extended a hand toward me, dripping black liquid. The floor beneath my knees rippled, and I could swear the altar's glow reflected impossible faces that weren't mine. The chanting shifted into a harmony of whispers, each voice speaking directly into my skull, revealing memories I had never had, futures that didn't belong to me. Key. I tried to scream. My voice wouldn't come. Key. I felt myself merging with the rhythm of the choir, unwillingly, every nerve pulsing with the impossible, inhuman music. The altar shuddered, bones rattling, neon tubes sparking. K. And the air grew thick with a viscous fog that smelled like burned hair and copper, curling into my lungs as I gasped. K. I backed into the tunnel wall, feeling it pulse under my hands. Shadows stretched toward me, faces forming, mouthing the words I couldn't understand, promising things I didn't want. One mask stepped toward me, tilting its head unnaturally, and I realized the figure wasn't walking, it was sliding across the floor, defying gravity in a rhythm synced to the song. The neon altar pulsed violently, sending flashes that revealed dozens of smaller masked figures, crawling in and out of the floor, walls, and ceiling, observing, waiting, conducting me into the ritual unknowingly. I fell backward, stumbling over debris, flashlight flickering, reeling twisted statues of bone and neon, each one depicting impossible movements, impossible forms that should not exist in our reality. The choir's song rose to a crescendo, the shadows coalescing into forms that defied physics, faces screaming, arms stretching impossibly, yet all perfectly synchronized in silent, grotesque ecstasy. I scrambled toward the exit, the chanting vibrating through every bone in my body, the tunnel stretching and narrowing, distorting my perception, turning seconds into hours of unbearable terror. As I reached the mouth of the tunnel, the figures vanished, leaving only the pulsing neon altar behind, humming with a life of its own, waiting for the next intruder foolish enough to enter. Even now, long after escaping, I hear the faint hum beneath the city, sometimes in my dreams, sometimes in silence at night, and I know the choir still waits, patient, glowing, and eternal. The man who films cults that don't want to be seen. Some people hunt ghosts. I film cults. Most disappear after a few weeks. The one I found outside a dying highway town is still active, and I wish I never pressed record. I drove through the town at 2 in the morning, streetlights flickering over empty storefronts and boarded houses. My camera battery was full. My instincts told me something lived here. The tip came from a truck driver who said he'd seen people walking through the woods wearing surgical masks, carrying lanterns that burned blue instead of yellow. I parked near the abandoned grain silos and followed a narrow dirt trail cutting through dead trees. My camera rolling, the infrared light painting everything in ghostly green shadows. At first I heard nothing but wind scraping branches together. Then a faint rhythmic clicking began somewhere deeper in the woods, mechanical, precise, and completely unnatural. The clearing appeared suddenly between the trees, and I froze. At least 20 figures stood in a perfect circle wearing identical white masks with thin vertical slits. No chanting, no talking, just that clicking sound echoing from the darkness while every masked head slowly turned toward the center of their circle. In the middle stood a wooden chair bolted into the ground. A man sat tied to it, alive, breathing slowly, eyes open, staring at nothing. The clicking stopped. One cult member stepped forward holding a small handheld camera identical to mine, pointing it directly at the man in the chair. Another stepped forward with a second camera, then another. Soon, every masked figure lifted cameras, silently filming the man-like predators studying prey. The man in the chair finally blinked and whispered something I couldn't hear. Every cultist leaned slightly forward at the exact same time. The first scream came suddenly and violently. The man's body jerked against the restraints, like electricity had shot through him. The cultists didn't move. They simply kept filming. I zoomed my lens and realized the man wasn't screaming in pain. He was screaming in confusion, like someone waking from a nightmare that refused to end. His eyes darted around the circle, landing on each mask, each camera lens staring back like cold mechanical eyes recording every second. One masked figure stepped closer and tilted their camera toward the man's face, adjusting focus with calm, practiced movements. Then the clicking sound returned, a toe. But now I understood it. Toe. It wasn't mechanical. It was every cultist pressing the record button on their cameras simultaneously. The man's breathing grew frantic. He begged them to stop filming. His voice cracked, desperate, terrified. No one answered. Instead, one cultist reached behind the chair and slowly pulled something metallic into the dim lantern light. He looked at his reflection and immediately started screaming again, louder this time. Raw panic tore through his voice like he'd seen something impossible staring back. I zoomed my camera further, trying to see the reflection clearly. But the angle was wrong, and the glass caught nothing but darkness. The cultists leaned closer with their cameras, capturing every twitch of the man's terror like surgeons studying an experiment. The man began thrashing violently against the chair, begging them to break the mirror. "Please," he shouted, voice cracking. "That's not me." The circle stayed silent. Every camera kept recording. The man's screams turned into choking sobs as he stared at the mirror like it was alive, whispering something only he could see. One of the cultists slowly stepped forward and gently turned the mirror so the man couldn't look away anymore. T's body went completely still. Then he whispered 3 words, "Followed me." The cultists lowered their cameras at the exact same moment. Clicking stopped, and every single masked head slowly turned in my direction. I ran before the first lantern light shifted toward the trees, my camera still recording the sound of footsteps moving calmly through the forest behind me. I never uploaded the footage, because when I reviewed the recording later, the mirror finally caught the reflection clearly. The man was right. Something was standing behind him, and it wasn't one of the cultists. Story 1. The Airbnb Nightmare. Don't book an Airbnb after this true scary story. Most people think Airbnb is safe because it's just someone's home, right? You read the reviews, see the photos, message the host. But what if the house was never really theirs? What if the person you booked from had already left, and something else moved in? Here's my story. I used to travel a lot for freelance photography. Cheap stays, unique locations, good lighting for shoots. Airbnb was perfect. In early 2025, I booked a place in a quiet suburb outside Portland, Oregon. The listing was for a small craftsman bungalow, built in the 1920s, recently renovated. Photos showed warm wood floors, a clawfoot tub, big windows. Host was Marcus. Profile picture just a houseplant. Super host status, 4.98 rating, 47 reviews. Message history was polite but short. Welcome. Key under mat. Check in anytime after 3. No welcome basket. No local tips. Fine. I was there to work. I arrived around 4 p.m. on a Thursday. Neighborhood was dead quiet. Big trees. No kids playing. No dogs barking. The key was exactly where he said. Inside smelled faintly of old books and something metallic I couldn't place. Bedroom upstairs had a queen bed with crisp white sheets. Bathroom had the clawfoot tub. Okay. Set up my gear in the living room. Tripod, lights, laptop. It's worked until about 10 p.m. Around 11, I heard it. A soft thump from upstairs. Not loud, but deliberate, like someone shifting weight on the floorboards. I froze. House was supposed to be empty. I called out, hello. Nothing. Went upstairs. Bedroom empty. Bathroom empty. Checked closets. Nothing. Figured it was settling wood or pipes. Went to bed. Next night, Friday, same thump. 11:17 p.m. exactly. This time followed by a slow creak, like someone walking across the upstairs hallway. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Grabbed my phone, flashlight on, hallway empty. But the floorboard creaked again, closer to the bedroom door. I locked it, sat against the headboard with the light pointed at the door. No more sounds. Eventually fell asleep around 3 a.m. Saturday morning I messaged Marcus. Hey, heard some weird noises upstairs last night. House settling or something. No reply all day. Checked the app. He hadn't been active since I checked in. That night I decided to record audio on my phone while I slept, just to prove to myself it was nothing. Went to bed around midnight. Woke up at 2:43 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Not mine. Slow, deep, right next to the bed. I didn't move, kept my eyes shut. Breathing continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. Opened my eyes. Room dark, silent. Grabbed phone. Audio was still recording. Played it back. It's 2 hours, 43 minutes, and 12 seconds. My breathing is steady. Then a second set starts. Slower, heavier, closer. Tate stops at 2 hours, 43 minutes, and 48 seconds. Then my own breathing speeds up as I wake. I didn't sleep after that. Packed my gear at dawn, left the key, drove to a hotel. Messaged Marcus again. Something is wrong with the house. Heard breathing in the bedroom. Leaving now. Still no reply. Checked the listing. Still active. Reviews. Still there. But one new review posted that morning from a guest who stayed the week before me. Quiet place. Slept great. Host never responded to messages though. I reported the listing. Airbnb investigated. Listing was taken down 2 days later. They said the host, Marcus, had not responded to their messages either. The property records showed the house had been empty for 3 months. Foreclosure. No one lived there. No renovations. The photos in the listing were from a realtor's old post. I still have the audio. I don't listen to it anymore. But sometimes at night I hear breathing slow, deep, right next to the bed, and I wonder if it followed me home, or if it was already waiting. Story 2. The Delivery Driver Horror. Don't order delivery after this true scary story. You order food or a package, and a stranger shows up at your door for 30 seconds. You smile, take the bag, say thanks, and they're gone. Most of us never think twice about it, but what if they didn't leave? What if they were never supposed to be there in the first place? The story. I worked as a DoorDash driver in a mid-sized city in the Midwest from late 2024 through most of 2025. Night shifts paid better, tips were bigger, fewer orders, less traffic. I liked the quiet. Radio on low, city lights, just me and the GPS. Most nights were boring. Pick up, drop off, repeat. One Tuesday in October 2025, around 11:30 p.m., I got a ping for a McDonald's order. Address was in a newer subdivision on the east side. Big houses, Cul-de-sacs, the kind of place where everyone has a Ring camera. Order was simple: Big Mac meal, large Coke, apple pie. Customer name: Alex. No special instructions. Was pulled up to the house at 11:48 p.m. Lights off, except one in the upstairs window. Porch light on. I parked, grabbed the bag, walked up the driveway. As I got closer, I noticed the Ring camera above the door was blinking red, recording. Normal. Rang the doorbell. Waited. No answer. Rang again. Nothing. I texted through the app. Here with your order. No reply. Waited another minute. Set the bag on the welcome mat. Took the photo for proof and started walking back to my car. That's when I heard it. The front door unlocking. Not opening. Just the deadbolt click. I froze. Turned around. Door still closed. No one visible through the glass. I called out. Orders on the mat. No response. Shrugging, I got in my car and left. Next night, Wednesday, same area, another order, same house. This time it was pizza from Domino's. Same name, Alex. Time, 11:45 p.m. ish. I pulled up, bag in hand, and noticed something off. The welcome mat was gone. His bag from last night was still sitting there, untouched, grease stain on the paper, pizza box on top of it now. I rang the bell again. Door unlocked with that same click. Still no one answered. I set the pizza on top of the old bag, took the photo bag from previous night visible in frame, and left. Texted the customer. Order left on porch. Previous delivery from last night, still here. No read receipt. Thursday night, third ping. Same house. This time Chinese takeout. I almost declined the order, but the pay was good and it was slow. Pulled up at 11:52 p.m. All previous bags were still there. McDonald's, pizza, now adding Chinese. Flies buzzing around. Smell was starting. Porch light off this time. It's only the upstairs window lit. I walked up anyway. Rang the bell. Deadbolt click. Louder this time. Door cracked open about an inch. Dark inside. No face. No face. No voice. I said, "Your food's here." Silence. I set the bag on the pile. Backed away slowly. Took the photo, all 3 orders visible, and left. I reported it to DoorDash support that night. Multiple deliveries to same address. No pickup. Food rotting on porch. They said they'd flagged the customer. I blocked the address on my app. Friday night, I got the ping again. Same house, same name. Kai declined immediately. App sent a follow-up. Customer has a high rating and has tipped well in the past. I declined again. Got another ping 20 minutes later. Same order, slightly higher pay. Declined. Saturday night, no ping from that address. Taint. I thought it was over. Sunday night, 2:17 a.m., my phone buzzed. Notification from Ring app, but I don't have Ring. It was a motion alert from a camera I didn't own. The thumbnail showed my own apartment building parking lot. My car. Someone standing next to it, holding a Domino's pizza box. Face not visible, just a silhouette. I ran outside. No one there. Pizza box on my hood. Inside, cold pizza, 1 slice missing. Note taped to the box. Thanks for the deliveries. See you soon. Alex. I moved 2 weeks later. Changed my number. Stopped driving for DoorDash, but sometimes at night, around 11:45 p.m., I hear a soft knock on my new apartment door. No one there when I check the peephole. It's the hallway light flickering. And I wonder if Alex is still waiting for the next order. Story 3. The Neighbor from Hell. Don't trust your neighbor after this true scary story. Your neighbor is supposed to be just there, someone you wave to, maybe say hi to in passing. They have their own life, their own routines. But what if they didn't? What if the person next door was paying closer attention to you than you ever realized, and they weren't who they seemed? The story. I moved into a small duplex in a quiet town outside Denver in early 2025. One-bedroom unit. Ground floor, shared wall with the neighbor on the right. The landlord said the other side had been rented by the same guy for 3 years. Quiet, pays on time, keeps to himself. Perfect. I was working remote as a graphic designer. Needed peace. First few weeks were normal. I heard him sometimes, footsteps, TV low through the wall, occasional cough. No music, no parties. I never saw him. His car, old gray Honda, was always parked in the same spot. Mail slot had J. Carter on it. Fine. Then the packages started. I'd order something online, Amazon, Target, whatever, and it would arrive in the afternoon. I'd find it on my doorstep, but sometimes the box was already open. Not torn, neatly sliced with a knife. Contents shifted like someone had looked inside and resealed it with new tape. First time I thought it was shipping damage. Second time a new laptop stand. I checked the camera I installed. Nothing. No one on the porch except the delivery guy. But the tape was different from Amazon's. Started paying more attention. The wall between us was thin. I'd hear him moving at odd hours to 3 a.m. footsteps, pacing back and forth. Not restless pacing. Measured, like he was counting steps. One night I pressed my ear to the wall. Breathing, slow, deliberate, right on the other side. I backed away. It stopped when I did. A week later, I came home to find a note slipped under my door. Handwritten on plain paper. Quiet night tonight. Good choice on the new headphones. Nye hadn't bought headphones. I'd looked at them online but never ordered. My heart dropped. I checked my browser history. No trace of the search. Cleared cache. Ran antivirus. Nothing. I installed a second camera, one inside, pointing at the front door and window. Next, delivery books. I watched live. Delivery guy drops it, leaves. 30 seconds later, the door handle turns from inside. No one visible. Handle turns back. Package gone from doorstep. I rewound the footage. Thieves. The box lifts itself off the mat. No hands, no shadow, just gone. I confronted the landlord. Came back 2 days later. He says he hasn't seen anything unusual. Maybe a raccoon or kids. I moved the cameras to cover the shared wall side. Started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. One night, 2:11 a.m., the camera inside picked up movement. The wall vent, old metal grate from the original build, slowly unscrewed itself from the inside. No tools visible. Just turning. Then silence. I didn't sleep. In the morning, the grate was back in place. Tightened perfectly. I messaged the landlord again. Said Carter was moving out soon. I asked when. No answer. 2 nights later, the breathing returned, but louder. Closer. Not through the wall anymore. From inside my apartment, I sat up, turned on the light. Nothing. But the vent grate was gone. Black hole in the wall. I grabbed my phone, flashlight on, shined it in. Single eye looking back at me. Pale blue. Unblinking. About 3 feet inside the duct. Teat blinked once. Dean. The grate slid back into place from the other side. Click. I left that night. Dean packed what I could carry. Drove to my sister's place 3 hours away. Reported it to police. They checked. House empty. No sign of Jay Carter. Landlord said he vacated early. No forwarding address. The vent was clean. No fingerprints, no DNA. I still have the footage. The eye. I don't watch it, but sometimes, late at night, I hear breathing again. Not from a vent, it's from under my bed. Slow, measured, waiting. And I wonder if he ever really left, or if he just followed me to the next wall. Story 4. The Hotel Room Horror. Don't stay in a hotel after this true scary story. Hotels are temporary homes. You check in, sleep, check out. You never think twice about the room number, the key card, the vent above the bed. But what if the room you booked wasn't empty when you arrived? What if it had been waiting for someone just like you? The story. I travel for work a few times a year. Conferences, client meetings, nothing glamorous. In November 2025, I booked a room at a mid-tier chain hotel in downtown Chicago. It's nothing fancy. King bed, desk, standard bathroom. Booking was through the hotel app. Room 712, 7th floor, non-smoking. Confirmation email came instantly. See you soon. I arrived late Thursday evening after a delayed flight. Lobby quiet. Check-in smooth. Clerk handed me the key card. Said elevators to your left. Enjoy your stay. No small talk. Room 712 was at the end of the hallway. Door opened with a soft beep. Inside smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet, like old perfume. Lights flickered on automatically. Bed made, towels folded, mini fridge humming. Standard. I dropped my bag, plugged in my laptop, took a shower. Around 11 p.m. I noticed the vent above the bed. Old metal grate, painted white, a little loose. I ignored it. Around 1 a.m. I woke up to scratching. It's not loud, soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on metal, coming from the vent. A tease. I sat up, turned on the bedside lamp. Scratching stopped. Tease silence. Thought it was pipes or mice. Went back to sleep. It's Friday night. Same thing. 1:12 a.m. Scratching again. Slower this time. Then a whisper. Not words, just breath. Long exhale through the grate. I froze. Grabbed my phone, flashlight on, shined it up. Grate still in place. No eyes, no movement. But the whisper came again, closer, like someone leaning in from the other side of the duct. I called the front desk. Maintenance issue in 712. Noises in the vent. Clerk said they'd send someone. No one came. I wedged a chair under the door handle, slept with the light on. Saturday morning, I asked at the desk about the vent. Clerk pulled up the room record. 712 has been deep cleaned. No reports of issues. I asked, who stayed there last? Guests checked out yesterday. Quiet stay. I pressed, any complaints? Clerk hesitated. One review mentioned odd noises at night, but housekeeping found nothing. That night I didn't sleep, sat on the bed, staring at the vent. At 1:19 a.m. the scratching started again, then a soft click, grate shifting. I grabbed my phone, started recording video, the grate tilted forward. A finger pale, thin, pushed through from inside the duct. Not enough to see a hand, just the tip of one finger. Hooked the grate, pulled it down an inch, then stopped. His finger withdrew. Grate clicked back into place. I played the video back, his finger clearly visible, but when I shined the flashlight up again, grate tight, no gaps, no dust disturbed. Sunday morning I checked out early, told the manager everything. He reviewed security footage from the hallway. No one entered or left my room after I checked in. No maintenance visits. Duct access was in the ceiling crawl space above the hallway. Locked. No signs of tampering. I left. Drove home. A week later the hotel emailed, "Thank you for your stay in room 712. We hope you enjoyed your time with us. Attached was a photo, my booking confirmation, but with a different name, not mine. Alex Carter. I never booked a hotel again, stay with friends, or drive through the night. But sometimes, when I'm in a quiet room, I hear scratching above me, soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on metal. And I wonder if room 712 is still waiting for the next guest who looks just like me. I injected myself to separate the worst parts of me, Part 1. There are medical files that never make it into journals because the subject changes too quickly for documentation to keep up. Tonight's story comes from one of those files. Let's begin. I didn't invent the compound to become a monster. I created it because I was tired of negotiating with the worst impulses inside me every single day. Addiction didn't start with street drugs or alcohol. It started with the quiet thrill of believing chemistry could refine what morality never fully could. The formula was simple in theory. A compound designed to isolate compulsive drives from higher reasoning without destroying either structure permanently. Funding vanished before human trials were approved. But by then, I had already synthesized a viable batch in my apartment laboratory. The serum rested in its vial like warm amber, thick and slow-moving, clinging to glass as if reluctant to be disturbed. The first injection burned along my vein with intimate warmth. Not painful, but invasive, like something folding itself neatly around my pulse. I didn't lose consciousness or hallucinate. Instead, the noise inside my head thinned into a single calm frequency. Guilt dulled first, then hesitation, then the faint recoil that normally stops a man from acting on darker curiosities. My reflection looked sharper within minutes, pupils dilated, jaws slackened slightly, skin shining with the sheen of controlled fever. I watched myself in the mirror, far longer than necessary, studying how relaxed my face appeared without the usual internal resistance. The calm unsettled me because beneath it hummed a tension that felt alert, observant, and quietly patient. Sleep became unnecessary that night, replaced by slow pacing through the apartment at precise intervals I did not consciously choose. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I found myself standing barefoot on cold tile. Examining my teeth under harsh fluorescent light, felt subtly loose, not unstable enough to fall, but flexible enough to remind me they were embedded in living bone. The second injection came earlier than planned because the silence inside my head felt too clean to surrender. This time the warmth pooled behind my ribs and along my jaw, concentrating in pressure points that throbbed afterward. I began touching my lips absent-mindedly, feeling the damp heat of my own breath as though texture had become more important than flavor. Food lost its appeal, but chewing fascinated me. The resistance of flesh between molars providing a sensory satisfaction I couldn't explain. I started recording my nights to track behavioral changes, assuming data would ground what intuition could not. The footage showed me rising again at 3:17, eyes open but unfocused, Tastra rigid as though listening to distant instruction. I would stand in the center of the room breathing deeply, chest expanding beyond necessity, nostrils flaring slightly. Then my mouth would open just enough for my tongue to trace each tooth in slow, deliberate inspection. There was no speech on the recordings, only layered breathing that sounded almost doubled. The two rhythms overlapped imperfectly. In the mornings, my throat ached, like I had whispered for hours, yet the audio captured no words. The third injection didn't burn at all, felt anticipated, absorbed instantly, welcomed by my bloodstream. After that dose, I began waking in unfamiliar positions, sheets twisted and damp, body angled toward the apartment door. One morning, I woke on the living room floor with my hand wrapped tightly around the doorknob. I checked the recordings, and found that at 3:17 I had opened the door and stepped into the hallway. I stood there for several minutes, completely still, breathing slowly, head tilting as if sampling the air. Then I walked toward the stairwell without shoes, without hesitation, and disappeared from the camera's view. The footage ends with the apartment door swinging shut on its own. I woke that morning in my bed. My feet were dirty. The drug started working without me, part 2. The apartment smelled of sweat and antiseptic. The remnants of my last injection lingering like a warning I had ignored. Tonight's story begins where part 1 left off. Let's continue. I woke at 3:17 a.m., as always, but my body had already risen before my mind fully engaged. The sheets were twisted around my legs, damp with sweat, sticking to the backs of my knees and thighs. I glanced at the mirror. My reflection lagged behind my movements by almost a heartbeat, a subtle, almost imperceptible delay that unsettled me. The door to the hallway stood open. I didn't remember opening it, yet my hand hovered over the knob, fingers twitching. I stepped out barefoot, toes curling against the cold linoleum, measuring the distance, feeling the vibration of air against the floor. The building was silent except for the low hum of the heater and the soft buzz of a flickering hallway light. My breath came slow, deliberate. I inhaled the faint smell of mildew mixed with my own sweat. I paused mid-step, head tilting slightly, as if listening for instructions that weren't spoken aloud. Downstairs, the lobby smelled of dust and neglected carpet. The air carried faint traces of chemicals from my own experiments, almost celebratory. I descended the stairs carefully, each footstep measured, each muscle coiling like a spring about to uncoil. At the bottom, the front door loomed. The handle felt warm under my hand, slick with residual heat from my previous excursions. I opened it and felt the night air like a tactile thrill, cool and expectant, pressing against every exposed patch of skin. The street beyond was empty, lampposts flickering, casting uneven shadows that stretched and yawned like living things. I began walking, barefoot still, toes curling against cold asphalt, feeling the texture of each crack and pebble. A T. My heartbeat synced with the rhythm of the city at night, slow and deliberate, measured in shadows rather than seconds. I passed a parked car and caught my reflection in the window. I was a second too late. Duh. My eyes blinked after my reflections. I felt a subtle shift in my body, like a marionette learning to move on its own, synchronizing with the street instead of the apartment. Heard a dog bark 2 blocks away. My neck craned toward the sound before I consciously decided to acknowledge it. A light flickered on in a distant apartment. My shadow elongated on the street, moving independently, pressing closer to the curb than my feet. I followed the same path I had unconsciously traced 3 nights before, but now with intention, each turn precise, anticipatory, rehearsed. A taze. The asphalt glistened faintly from previous rain, each reflection a mirror I could almost step into, almost merge with. Passing a pedestrian, I felt the faint rush of air as they exhaled. My fingers itched, brushing lightly against my own chest without thought. The serum was unnecessary tonight. My body knew the route, the rhythm, the ritual. The chemical wasn't driving me anymore. I reached the corner where streetlights cast triangles of amber onto the pavement. I paused. The mirror image of myself lingered half a step behind. A cat hissed from an alley. My head rotated in perfect synchrony to the sound, too fluid for anyone else to notice. I licked my lips and tasted copper faintly, though there was no blood. A T. My tongue pressed against teeth, testing alignment without voluntary command. I turned onto a side street. The shadows there were thicker, darker, deeper than anywhere I had walked before. Tina slowed, listening to the subtle noises, the hum of electricity, the scrape of metal in the distance, the soft thump of my own pulse. I realized that if anyone looked, I would appear as nothing but a silhouette, swaying slightly in the dark, perfectly ordinary, yet wrong. At the end of the street, the alley curved sharply. My reflection hesitated, lingering fractionally behind me. I stepped forward. The reflection delayed again, and I smiled faintly. The serum no longer mattered. I returned to my apartment before dawn, shoes nowhere to be found, soles dirty, sheets twisted, body humming with satisfaction. In the mirror, I saw the first hint of distortion. My own eyes blinked after the reflection, just slightly. I knew the nights would continue, each one longer, stranger still, until I could no longer tell where I ended and the wandering began. I can feel myself moving through the streets. Part 3. Some nights are meant for sleep. Some nights belong to something else entirely. Tonight's story is the one where I realized I didn't control it anymore. Let's begin. I woke at 3:17 a.m., as always, but this time the apartment seemed smaller, walls pressing closer, shadows longer, and the floor slick under my bare feet. My reflection blinked late, lagging further behind each movement, pupils too wide, lips parting a fraction after I spoke silently to myself. I rubbed my jaw absent-mindedly and felt a subtle crack, like cartilage rearranging itself, though no pain accompanied the shift. The serum lay on the counter, untouched, almost apologetic, but my body didn't need it anymore. It was learning. I descended the stairs with precision, each step measured as if my feet were taking notes on the texture of concrete. The hallway light flickered violently. I didn't flinch. The air smelled damp, antiseptic, and chemical, mingling with my own sweat. The front door opened without hesitation. I didn't remember the movement, yet my hand's grip was perfect, instinctive. The street greeted me like a long-lost ritual, cold against soles, wind scraping against my ears, urging me forward. I walked past the first street lamp, and my shadow seemed to lean into the light unnaturally, stretching, hunting, independent of my body. The reflections of passing windows hesitated as I passed, delayed like mine, caught in the rhythm of my wandering. I noticed a figure down the road, a silhouette framed by dim light, moving slowly, unaware of my presence, yet perfectly catalogued by my senses. I slowed just enough to savor the distance, the texture of air between us, the cadence of their footsteps, the heat of their exhale. My jaw flexed, pressing tongue against teeth repeatedly, testing alignment as if each movement was crucial to survival. I adjusted my hands compulsively, fingers tracing subtle patterns across my chest, shoulders, forearms, feeling every vein, tendon, and muscle wake. A distant car passed, headlights cutting my shadow sharply, revealing the strange angles my body now assumed instinctively. I pressed my lips together, tasting faint iron, though no blood existed. It's just anticipation and hunger for movement, for motion, for sensation. The figure stopped briefly, froze automatically, timing my breath to the beat of their steps, body perfectly still. Predator and observer merged. My reflection appeared in a shop window, lagged behind me by almost a full second now. Pupil dilation delayed, lips parted in slow mimicry. I smiled, testing the delay, testing control, and felt satisfaction ripple through sinews I didn't consciously command. I followed the figure 2 blocks, counting each crack in the asphalt with precise awareness, each pebble a reference point. A cat hissed from an alley, and my head rotated before my conscious mind registered the sound. I touched the wall for balance, fingertips grazing residue of other hands, the texture electric, unfamiliar, thrilling. The figure disappeared around a corner. I paused, listening, feeling, absorbing the vibration of air as though it carried whispers meant for me. My jaw flexed again, slightly wider, the hinge aching faintly, reminding me of something internal rearranging silently. I continued walking, now alone, rhythm perfectly matched to the heartbeat I felt in the soles of my feet. Windows, streetlights, alleys became mirrors of movement, stretching time, bending perception, teaching my body a language I couldn't name. At a crosswalk, I stopped for the light, but my shadow pressed forward, leaning into the intersection, independent, patient, predatory. The reflection lagged behind in the shop window, lips moving half a second too late, eyes tracking my own motion without consent. I pressed fingers to teeth, tasting enamel, copper, anticipation, measuring angles and resistance, calibrating for what came next. Down the next block, a pedestrian glanced toward me. I didn't smile or acknowledge them, yet the skin on my arms prickled in response, toned sharply into an alley, shadow and reflection falling behind, waiting for me to lead, follow, synchronize, obey. When I returned to my apartment hours later, sheets twisted, soles dirty, jaw aching, eyes wide, I knew sleep was no longer mine to take. I looked into the mirror. It lagged again. I was already smiling before it began. Something else lives in my body at night. Part 4. Some bodies are prisons. Some are laboratories. Mine became both. Tonight's story is where I disappeared, and something else claimed the night. Let's begin. I woke at 3:17 a.m., as always, but this time the air inside my apartment felt alien. Thick, aware of me as I was not fully aware of it. My reflection no longer lagged, moved freely ahead of me, lips curling before I smiled, eyes opening wider than mine had managed in years. I rubbed my jaw and felt it stretch further than ever, cartilage yielding like pliant metal, teeth grinding faintly with deliberate pressure. The serum lay untouched. I realized I had not needed it in nights. My body had rewritten its own instructions. I descended the stairs, barefoot, silent, each footfall tracing paths my conscious mind had never mapped. The hallway light flickered in response, or so it seemed, as if acknowledging the presence it no longer recognized. I opened the front door. The street greeted me with cold humidity, fog curling around lampposts like smoke rising from the earth. My body moved with purpose, limbs independent, hands flexing, shoulders adjusting, head scanning in arcs wider than my conscious sight permitted. Windows along the street reflected shapes I no longer trusted. Shadows, stretching, shifting, teasing recognition that was never my own. I passed a group of late-night walkers. My body slowed slightly, shadow aligning with theirs, angles wrong, movement too precise, unnatural. They didn't notice, yet I felt the tensing of muscles, the shift of weight, the pulse of breath in their chests. I followed instinct, not thought, each block a ritual. Each alleyway a corridor of instruction I had not consciously written. A dog barked nearby. My head rotated in perfect anticipation, lips parting slightly, tongue brushing against teeth, testing strength, agility, readiness. I caught a reflection in a shop window. It smiled before I did, leaned forward as though trying to lure me further, teasing autonomy. My jaw cracked faintly, satisfying, as if my body were calibrating for something beyond balance or survival. The night air smelled of asphalt, rain, chemicals, and a hint of iron that hadn't existed before. I pressed fingers against my lips, tasted my own enamel, copper, and heat. measuring the resilience of what had been mine. I realized I wasn't simply wandering. I was scanning, cataloging, evaluating, practicing motions I had never consciously chosen. A solitary pedestrian glanced toward me. My shoulders shifted reflexively, posture calibrating to evoke calm yet carry threat. My reflection in a nearby window leaned forward independently, mouth twitching before mine moved, eyes widening in anticipation. I felt hunger not for food, but for movement, control, motion, the silent acknowledgement of space bending to my presence. The serum was irrelevant. I was the vector now, a vessel of something I could barely recognize as me. I pressed onward, turning corners, slipping past shadows, absorbing textures, listening to the heartbeat of streets, concrete, lampposts. My jaw flexed repeatedly, each movement precise, instinctive, predatory, echoing the rhythm of my wandering. Windows, glass, metal surfaces, all reflected versions of me I could not trust. Each slightly ahead or behind, teasing autonomy, mocking my conscious claim. I paused at the far edge of the city block, shadows pooled in corners like ink, waiting. My body leaned forward, independent, aware. The pedestrian from earlier had vanished, but my body continued mapping, memorizing, sensing, flexing muscles I could not command. Cat hissed from an alley, and my head turned fluidly, smoothly, too fast for conscious thought. I licked lips, pressed tongue against teeth, tasting air, anticipation, instinct. By the time I returned, apartment lights were off, sheets twisted, feet filthy, jaw aching, and I was unsure if I had ever truly left. The reflection in the mirror now moved before me entirely, lips forming expressions I had never learned, eyes widening in recognition that wasn't mine. I sat, exhausted yet electrified, knowing that sleep was impossible, that consciousness was optional, that I no longer resided in my own body fully. Something else lived there at night, something patient, something meticulous, something free. My neighbor makes dolls that look too real. The Doll Maker, Part 1. Most neighborhoods have a strange house people don't talk about. It's the one with the curtains always closed and lights glowing long after midnight. It's where something inside stays busy while the rest of the street sleeps. Mine sits 3 houses down from me. It's an older gray place with warped siding and a narrow porch that creaks whenever someone steps on it, though I almost never see anyone coming or going. When I first moved here, I assumed the house was empty. The lawn is trimmed, the mailbox gets cleared, but the windows stay covered, like whoever lives there prefers not to be seen. The first time I noticed something strange was a month after moving in. I was walking my dog around 2 in the morning when I saw a soft yellow light glowing from the second floor window. The room looked like a workshop. Long wooden tables stretched across the floor, covered in tools, fabric, and shapes I couldn't quite make out from the sidewalk below. My dog stopped walking the moment we reached the house. Kay planted his feet firmly against the pavement and refused to move another step forward. Kay, at first I thought he saw a raccoon or another animal nearby, but his eyes weren't searching the yard. Kay was staring directly at the lit window above us. Clois, so I followed his gaze. That's when I saw the dolls sitting at the tables. There were dozens of them arranged neatly in chairs like an audience waiting for something to begin, each one sitting perfectly upright beneath the warm yellow light. Taya, they weren't toy dolls. Not even the expensive collector ones people keep in glass cases. These were human-sized, full-sized bodies with arms resting naturally in their laps, legs crossed or straight depending on how they'd been placed in the chairs. But the faces were the part that made my stomach tighten. They looked real, not realistic, not stylized. Real, skin texture, tiny lines near the eyes, tactile expressions frozen across their faces, like they had been caught mid-thought. My dog started whining softly beside me, the kind of nervous sound animals make when they sense something wrong that humans can't quite understand yet. I remember thinking maybe the neighbor was a sculptor or a prop artist working on movie mannequins. That explanation felt safe enough at the time. Then one of the dolls slowly tilted forward in its chair, just slightly. Barely noticeable, but I was certain it hadn't been leaning like that before. Stared at the window longer than I should have, trying to convince myself I imagined the movement. The workshop looked completely still again, every doll facing forward. Every body frozen exactly where it had been placed, till the porch light behind me suddenly turned on. I turned around quickly, my dog barking once in surprise. The man from the gray house was standing in the doorway, tall and thin, wearing a stained apron and smiling politely like I had just interrupted something important. He asked if I was admiring his work. Akana glanced back toward the window without answering him. One of the dolls had been moved closer to the glass. Akana, its head tilted slightly to one side, and even from the street, I could see its face clearly now. Skumt. It looked exactly like the man standing behind me on the porch. One of the dolls blinked. The Doll Maker, Part 2. Tonight's story begins with something you might pass by without noticing, until it notices you. The gray house down the street isn't empty. Something waits inside, patient, observing, and it's getting better at mimicking life. After the first night I saw the dolls through the workshop window, I tried to tell myself it wasn't strange. People have hobbies. Artists work late. Sculptors carve faces. But that explanation felt hollow. For days, I avoided the gray house, took longer routes with my dog, looping around the block even if it added minutes to our walks. Every time we neared, he froze and refused to step closer. Sleep became difficult. My dreams carried the dolls' faces. Rows of seated figures staring, blinking, waiting. I woke, sweating, heart hammering, and still the image lingered, sharp as the edges of a knife. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself walking past the house again. Through the window, I could see the tables clearly now, lined with tools, fabric, and dozens of dolls seated in careful rows. They were human-sized, perfectly upright, staring straight ahead in their chairs. Up close, the skin appeared textured, almost alive. Tiny imperfections, freckles, subtle discoloration, wrinkles along the eyelids, faint veins visible under translucent layers. It's too real for any ordinary doll. The more I studied the faces, the more recognizable they became. The jogger from our street, the man from the gas station, the mail carrier, even the older neighbor who walks his terrier every evening. It was as though someone had collected half the neighborhood and frozen them under those yellow lights. My stomach tightened with each familiar face. Something wasn't right. One doll near the edge of the table caught my attention. Its eyes were slightly wider, the eyelids thinner, the gaze sharper. I leaned in, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was the reflection of a streetlight. Then it blinked, slowly, deliberately. I didn't want to admit I wasn't alone. The street behind me seemed darker, heavier, as though the shadows themselves had weight. The porch light flicked on, sudden and bright. Long shadows stretched across the yard and over the sidewalk, cutting the night in half. Slowly, I turned around. The man from the gray house stood in the doorway, tall, thin, wearing a stained work apron, completely calm. His smile was polite, practiced, like he had been waiting for this exact moment. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. The words were normal, everyday, casual, but the way they hung in the quiet night made my stomach drop. I wanted to run, but my feet were routed. My eyes drifted back to the window, to the blinking doll. Its head was now turned toward him, as if it was waiting for an instruction. "They're not finished yet," he said. His smile widened slightly, but his eyes never left mine. "I'm still working on the ones that move." I couldn't answer. The air felt thick, suffocating. Even the wind outside seemed to hesitate before touching me. I tried to remember something normal, anything ordinary, but the faces in the workshop crowded every memory. One of the dolls at the far table looked like me. My hair, my expression from when I first stared through the window, frozen in a chair under that yellow glow. I forced myself to take a step backward, but the porch light made my shadow stretch unnaturally long across the sidewalk. Each step toward the street felt heavier, as if the weight of their staring eyes pressed against me. I watched the dolls again. Every single one had shifted subtly. Their heads tilted slightly, their gazes now sharper, more precise. Aligned toward the window, toward the front of the house. I didn't know whether to scream, to run, or to pretend I didn't see it at all. My rational mind failed completely. The night, the street, the quiet, all of it felt unreal. The man's voice broke the silence once more. "You'll see soon. They'll understand everything once I finish them." His tone was gentle, almost fatherly, and yet it carried a weight that made my throat dry. I realized then that he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the dolls. Each one of them sat like students awaiting a lesson they didn't know they were enrolled in. I tried to move again. My dog whimpered, backing into my legs, sensing something I didn't yet understand. The street felt smaller. The distance between me and the gray house seemed impossible to cross. The doll that had blinked before slowly tilted its head further, facing toward me. The movement was so subtle it might have been imagined, yet I knew I had seen it clearly. The air smelled faintly of wax, clay, and something else I couldn't name. Warm, metallic, almost like blood, but faint, almost subliminal. It made my stomach turn. I forced myself to look at the other dolls. There were now more of them than I remembered. They filled the tables, filled the room, lined every wall with their silent, staring faces. Some looked at each other briefly. Some didn't. Every one of them had a presence that pressed into the space between me and the window. The man stepped aside slightly, gesturing with one hand toward the workshop. "Come closer. Need to see the work properly," he said softly, still smiling. I couldn't respond. My feet felt nailed to the pavement. My mind raced with thoughts I didn't want to think. Were they alive? Were they human? Had they taken the neighbors? I turned my eyes one last time to the blinking doll. Its head now faced me completely, eyes wide, perfect, impossibly human. And I realized the truth I had tried to deny. The dolls weren't just copies. They were replacements. Something about the room shifted. I swear I heard soft whispers. Not through the street, not even through the window, but inside my head. The man's voice was the last thing I heard before I stumbled back and ran home. "Don't worry, soon you'll understand." I locked the door behind me and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The street outside was quiet, too quiet, and I knew, in a way I can't explain, that I would have to go back, because the dolls were waiting, and one of them had my face. The dolls look exactly like my neighbors, The Doll Maker, Part 3. Tonight's story begins in a neighborhood that looks ordinary, until the quiet becomes unbearable, and the familiar faces around you are not what they seem. Something waits in the gray house again, patient, watching, calculating. After the first night I saw the dolls blink, I avoided the street for days. Every walk with my dog became a reroute, every shadow a threat, yet curiosity gnawed at me. I knew I had to return. Sleep was impossible. Every sound felt amplified. Floorboards, distant traffic, even the wind seemed to whisper in my ears. I imagined dozens of eyes observing me from behind walls, studying my steps, my heartbeat, my hesitation. At 2 in the morning, I found myself standing outside the gray house again. The workshop window glowed, spilling yellow light onto the street like a lantern for the restless. And I felt my stomach twist in dread and anticipation. Inside, the workshop was brighter than I remembered. Tables were lined with dolls, more than I could count. Faces familiar yet subtly wrong, sculpted with uncanny detail. Neighbors, friends, and even my own distorted likeness stared back at me. One doll near the edge of the table moved first. Its eyelids blinked slowly, deliberately, impossibly human. My throat went dry. Dolls don't blink. Mannequins don't blink. Yet this one did, and the others followed, subtly, almost in unison. I stepped closer to the window, heart hammering, and noticed that the central figure had my own face, twisted slightly as if carved from a nightmare version of myself. Its eyes locked on mine. I stumbled backward, unable to look away. The man appeared on the porch, tall, thin, apron-stained, calm, as always. "You came back," he said softly, smiling politely. His gaze shifted toward the window. "They're learning. Tease, you will see soon enough." The dolls shifted in their chairs, synchronized, leaning subtly toward me. Each movement was deliberate, purposeful. One raised a hand, another tilted its head. The room felt alive, breathing, aware, studying me. I tried to flee, but my legs felt heavy, unresponsive. The whispers began, soft at first, then urgent, filling my mind with commands, names, my own voice echoing. Each syllable pressed against my skull like a physical weight. The man stepped closer, gesturing gently. "They want to understand life. They need a guide, someone to show them motion, expression, understanding. You're perfect for that." Panic clawed at me, but my body remained rooted. The central doll blinked again, deliberately, the glossy eyes locking with mine. Every subtle motion, every tilt of a head, every soft whisper pressed into my mind. I realized then the dolls weren't passive, they were evolving. I stumbled backward, dog growling low, pressing into my legs. The workshop seemed infinite, the dolls multiplying in my imagination. Pressing closer with awareness that transcended their forms, Cape felt impossible. The man's voice was gentle, almost soothing. "They will take only what you allow. You've allowed enough just by observing. Soon, they will move, speak, think like you, and you will witness it all." The whispers swelled to a cacophony, yet I could distinguish my name repeated, instructions forming in my head. I realized I had already been marked, recorded, cataloged. The dolls knew me better than I knew myself. I turned toward the window one last time. Central doll, my own face, stared back at me. Its eyes were alive, calculating, waiting. I knew that I would return, compelled, trapped, because it had already claimed me. And as I stumbled backward down the street, every shadow pressing against me, I understood the terrifying truth. The dolls weren't just mimicking life, they were preparing to replace it. They Will Take Me. The Doll Maker, Part 4. Tonight's story begins in the moments just before terror fully takes hold. The gray house waits silently, filled with faces that were never meant to move, never meant to watch, and yet they do. After returning to the window, I couldn't stop thinking about the dolls. Each blink, each subtle motion haunted me, replaying in my mind. Every familiar face, sculpted in silicone, was a silent accusation. I walked past the house at night, heart hammering, dog pressed against my leg. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the street. Every lamp seemed dim, as if the night itself was pulling me toward the workshop. The door opened before I could knock. He stood there, tall, thin, calm, apron-stained. His smile was polite, rehearsed, but it carried a weight that made my skin crawl. Inside, the dolls were arranged differently this time. Hundreds of them lined the walls, tables, and floor. Faces familiar, eyes sharp, movements subtle yet undeniably alive. The workshop breathed with their awareness. The central doll my face sat upright, eyes wide, lips parted slightly. It blinked, slowly, deliberately. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. It wasn't just a doll. It was me, or what I might become. The man spoke softly. They're ready. They've learned enough. Now you must teach them the rest. Movement, expression, understanding. You're the final piece. Every word sank into my chest like lead. I tried to run, but the room felt impossible. Each step forward pressed me closer to the dolls, closer to my own mirrored face, and further from any hope of escape. One doll reached out. Its hand brushed mine. Cold, wet, impossibly alive. My stomach turned. A T. I realized the others were waiting for the same instruction, each small motion already anticipating mine. The whispers inside my skull swelled, forming words I could barely recognize. Names, movements, commands. My own voice echoed back at me, a cruel imitation, a preview of what was to come. The man smiled wider, calm, almost fatherly. They will take what you allow, and you've already allowed enough by observing, by returning. Soon they will move, speak, think like you, and I will watch. The dolls blinked together, each eye perfectly aligned, synchronized. The central doll's lips parted slightly. I heard a soft click, like a joint unlocking, and I knew it was no longer inert. I stumbled backward, dog yelping low in fear. Shadows pressed closer. The air thickened, almost solid, smelling of wax, clay, and faint iron. Every breath burned, every heartbeat echoed like a drum. I realized then that I would never walk away. The dolls weren't just mimicking life, they were replacing it. They were evolving, learning, waiting. One by one, they would take everything from me. The central doll blinked, tilted its head, eyes glossy and alive. My own reflection stared back at me, waiting for me to step closer, to surrender fully. The man's voice cut through the dread, gentle, insistent. Welcome to the collection. You will help them understand life as it should be understood. They will be perfect, and so will you. I turned to run, but my legs refused. The whispers inside my head became deafening, guiding my every movement, pressing me closer to the dolls. I realized I was already theirs. The room seemed infinite now, filled with faces, eyes, and whispers. The dolls leaned slightly, moving as if breathing, waiting for my final step into them, into the collection, into the gray house. And as the door closed behind me, silence fell, thick, suffocating. I understood everything. Escape was never possible. Observation had already sealed my fate. The last thing I felt before darkness claimed me completely was the cold touch of silicone fingers against my skin and the soft blink of eyes that were mine, yet not mine. The man smiled one final time, polite, rehearsed, satisfied. The dolls had learned everything, Atia, and I was the final lesson. We made it. The whole file. It's done. I'm putting the collection to bed, for now. Remember, what you saw today was only what could be documented, the artifacts that finally went silent. They haven't disappeared. They've just been put away. Sleep well. Take care.